There's a moment many people have lived through, but almost no one talks about out loud. It's the moment you wake up at 3 in the morning, lying still in bed, staring at the ceiling in the dark while your brain starts running. Not running dreams, but running worst-case scenarios for tomorrow. Your car could break down, your laptop could die, something could go wrong at work. Your pet might need emergency surgery, a strange email from the bank, a bill you forgot about. None of it has happened yet, but in your mind, it's vivid enough to make your heart beat faster. The strange part is that nothing is actually happening in that moment. The room is quiet. Everything is exactly the same as it was a few hours ago. But your body isn't. Your stomach tightens slightly. Your shoulders tense up. Your brain is trying to solve tomorrow's problems using the energy of the night. And what makes it worse is this quiet realization: if even one of those scenarios becomes real, you don't have much room to maneuver. That's the state a lot of people are living in, even if during the day they still go to work, still laugh, still look like they're fine. But at night, that outer layer gets thinner, and the truth slips through. One small misstep is all it would take for things to get very difficult. Now imagine a different version of that same moment. You still wake up in the middle of the night. You're still staring at the ceiling. But this time your brain doesn't spiral into panic. The bad thoughts may still show up, but they don't take over. You know that if the car breaks down, you can fix it. If there's an unexpected bill, you can handle it. It won't be pleasant, but it won't be the end of the world. You exhale, and for the first time in a long while, you fall back asleep. The difference between those two moments isn't that you've become rich. You didn't win the lottery. You didn't reach financial independence. You still have to go to work in the morning. You still have responsibilities. You still have worries. But one thing has changed very clearly: you're no longer living in a constant state of alarm. A lot of people think financial milestones are just arbitrary numbers invented by wealthy people to make everyone else feel inadequate. But in reality, some numbers matter because the human brain reacts differently once you reach them. And the first number that truly creates that shift isn't $1 million. It's not a six-figure income either. It's much smaller than that. So modest that if you say it out loud, it might even sound a little ridiculous. But it's big enough to do one extremely important thing: it gives you permission to stop living in fear. That number is $10,000. And this isn't a story about getting rich. It's a story about the first night you fall asleep without bracing yourself for a disaster the next morning. Before you reach that point, most people's financial lives operate in a very different state, even if few ever name it correctly. It's the state of living from one paycheck to the next, where every decision, big or small, is distorted by one underlying feeling: fear. Not always loud, panicked fear, but a low, constant pressure that makes you feel like you're walking on thin ice at all times. In that state, even ordinary things become strangely exhausting. You stand in the grocery store staring at 2 boxes of cereal that look almost identical, and your brain starts doing math. Not because you enjoy comparing prices, but because every dollar carries weight. You turn down invitations to go out to dinner, not because you don't want to see your friends, but because you know that one meal alone could throw off your entire week's budget. You slowly learn how to avoid, make excuses, and retreat from social spaces simply because they cost money. And then there are worse days. The check engine light comes on. Your phone slips out of your hand and the screen shatters. An unexpected charge appears in your account. In this situation, there is no such thing as a minor inconvenience. Every problem is a potential disaster. Your brain doesn't ask, "What's the best solution?" It asks, "How am I going to survive this?" Life turns into a constant chain of reactions where your only goal is to keep yourself from going under. What matters here is understanding that this state has nothing to do with a lack of discipline or intelligence. This is not a moral failure. This is biology. When you don't have cash reserves, your brain automatically switches into what psychologists call survival mode. In that mode, stress hormones like cortisol spike, and your brain gives absolute priority to immediate threats: rent, food bills, your current job. Your mental bandwidth is limited. When it's completely consumed by short-term worries, there's simply no room left for long-term thinking. This is decision fatigue. You're forced to make too many small decisions every single day just to get by until your brain is exhausted. And once your brain is exhausted, the quality of your decisions drops. Not because you're bad at decision-making, but because the system is overloaded. Telling someone in this state that they should think long-term, start investing early, or be more disciplined is like telling someone to plan a vacation while their house is on fire. In theory, the vacation sounds great. In reality, all of their energy is going into putting out the flames. So if you're living paycheck to paycheck and constantly feel like you're one step behind everyone else, understand this. When you don't have cash, you're not living poorly. You're living in a state of constant alarm. And then a very strange milestone appears, not loud, not glamorous, but powerful enough to change how you experience everyday life. That milestone is $10,000. Not a number you brag about, not a number that makes other people see you differently, but the first number that can actually put out the fire in your head. It's important to be clear about this from the start. $10,000 doesn't buy you expensive things. It doesn't upgrade your lifestyle in a way Instagram can see. It doesn't turn you into someone who looks good with money to other people. What it buys is something far more invisible and far more valuable: breathing room. Before this point, every problem triggers a panic response. The check engine light isn't just a sign that something's wrong with your car. It's the start of a mental spiral. How much will this cost? Where will the money come from? Do I need to put it on a card? How am I going to get through this month? After this point, the same situation happens, but the emotion is different. You're still annoyed, you're still frustrated, but you're not panicking. The warning light shifts from disaster to inconvenience, and the difference between those two states is an entire world. The same thing happens with medical bills. Without savings, a single ER visit or an unexpected test can cost you nights of sleep. Your brain isn't thinking about your health, it's thinking about money. But when you know there's $10,000 sitting there untouched, the situation is still unpleasant, but it's no longer threatening. You deal with it, and then you keep living. This is what people call the emergency fund effect. And the name is slightly misleading. An emergency fund isn't valuable because you're going to spend it. Most people who build one almost never touch it. Its real value is knowing it's there. That knowledge alone changes how your brain evaluates risk. Biologically, this is very clear. When you no longer feel like every problem could ruin your life within a week, cortisol, your primary stress hormone, starts to drop. And when cortisol drops, your brain shifts from reaction mode into thinking mode. You're no longer just reacting to problems. You start evaluating, comparing, and choosing. You gain time. And in finance, time is a massive advantage. $10,000 doesn't eliminate all worry, but it draws a very clear line, the line between panic and calm. Before this milestone, you're constantly putting out fires. After it, you can step back, look at the fire, and decide how to handle it. $10,000 doesn't make you rich. It makes you stop panicking. Once the fire in your head has been temporarily put out, a subtle but deeply important change begins to show up. The way you see risk is no longer the same. Before the $10,000 mark, every risk feels dangerous. Not because the risk itself is huge, but because you don't have a buffer to absorb mistakes. A bad decision isn't just a bad decision, it's a direct threat to your ability to survive the next few months. In that state, you avoid risk, not because you're conservative, but because you're not safe enough to take it. Asking for a promotion sounds reasonable, but a question echoes in your head. What if they say no and start seeing me differently? Learning a new skill sounds great for the future, but the cost of the course and the time it takes both feel like things you're not sure you can afford. Changing jobs might mean higher pay, but the gap between jobs feels like a deep hole with no safety rope. After $10,000, those decisions don't magically become easy, but they become thinkable. You stop asking, will I survive? You start asking, what's the probability this works and what's the worst-case scenario? That shift matters. It turns risk from an invisible monster into a problem you can actually analyze. You still don't quit your job impulsively. You still don't throw money at every opportunity that sounds exciting, but you permit yourself to think bigger. You're willing to schedule a conversation with your boss about advancement because if the answer is no, you'll be okay. You're willing to spend money learning a new skill because if it doesn't pay off immediately, you don't collapse. You're willing to consider changing jobs because the job search period no longer feels like a financial death sentence. This often gets misunderstood as becoming more reckless. In reality, it's the opposite. You're not more reckless, you're just less desperate. Before you avoided risk because everything could destroy you. Now you can evaluate risk because you have room to make a small mistake without being wiped out. This is where the idea of walking away from panic shows up. Not walking away from your job, not walking away from your responsibilities, but walking away from the panic that used to hijack every choice. You're no longer forced to say yes just because you're afraid to say no. You're no longer trapped in bad decisions simply because you don't have a backup plan. And here's the most interesting part. When you know you have options, you rarely have to use them. You don't need to quit to feel powerful. You don't need to be aggressive to prove your value. Just knowing you're not cornered is enough to change how you walk into every conversation. When you have options, you don't need to use them. Just knowing they exist is enough. At this point, if you think the most important thing you've gained is the $10,000 sitting in your account, you're looking in the wrong place. That number is just the surface. What really changed runs much deeper in your behavior and ultimately in your identity. You don't just have more money, you become a different kind of person. There's a reason almost no one talks about this. $10,000 is the hardest milestone. Not because it's huge, but because the road to it is quietly brutal. The first $1,000 is hell. You have to break old habits without seeing any clear reward. You cut back track, everything say no, make sacrifices, and yet your life doesn't noticeably improve right away. Your brain asks a dangerous question. What is this even for? A lot of people quit here not because they're weak, but because there's no visible feedback. But if you make it through that phase, the most important thing that happens isn't that the balance goes up. It's when you start seeing yourself differently. You stop treating saving like a temporary financial diet. You stop telling yourself you'll just push through for a bit and then go back to your old ways. You start seeing holding on to money as part of who you are. This is a massive difference. The financial dieter is always tense, always counting down to the day they can relax. The person with a new identity isn't. They don't rely on white-knuckle discipline every day because their choices have changed at the root. They don't ask, "Can I buy this?" They ask, "Does this fit the kind of person I'm becoming?" That's why income, past a certain point, stops being the deciding factor. You can earn a lot of money and still feel financially empty. Plenty of high earners save nothing because they never learned how to keep money. Meanwhile, some people with very average incomes feel secure because they've built a foundation. The difference isn't who earns more in a given month. It's who can keep money across many months, and this is the most underrated skill in all of personal finance. Not investing, not salary negotiation, but the ability to stop every dollar you earn from slipping through your fingers. When you reach $10,000, you prove something more important than any spreadsheet ever could. You prove that you can delay gratification. You can endure discomfort quietly. You can repeat the right behaviors even when no one is watching and there's no immediate reward. That's not a financial skill. That's self-control. $10,000 doesn't prove you're rich. It proves you can control yourself. At this point, there's a very easy misunderstanding to fall into, and if it's not addressed clearly, it can ruin everything that comes next. $10,000 is an incredibly important milestone, but it is not the final one. And the most dangerous mistake is confusing it for something it isn't. $10,000 is not $20,000. That sounds obvious, but in lived experience, a lot of people blur these two milestones together. $10,000 has a very specific job putting out fires. It helps you stop reacting to every small problem. It pulls you out of survival mode where every decision is driven by fear, but that's all it does. It doesn't create momentum. It doesn't make money start working alongside you. At $10,000, you're no longer panicking, but you still need to be careful. A large expense still requires thought. One bad slip can still push you backward. You've escaped fighting fires with your bare hands, but you haven't built a fireproof system yet. And if you think you're done at this point, it's very easy to end up right back where you just escaped from. $20,000 is a different story. That's when momentum begins to show up. That's when you have enough of a foundation to stop just reacting and start building. But to get there, you have to understand the true role of $10,000. It's not a reward. It's not a signal that you can fully relax. It's a doorway. That doorway leads you out of the room where everything feels urgent. But stepping through it doesn't mean you've arrived. It only means you've escaped the most dangerous part. A lot of people step outside, take a deep breath, and then walk right back in because they confuse relief with long-term safety. That's why managing expectations at this stage matters so much. If you treat $10,000 as I made it, you'll loosen discipline exactly when you shouldn't. If you see it as now, I can spend more freely, you're using a fire extinguisher to start a new fire. $10,000 needs to keep its original role protecting you from shocks, not funding a new lifestyle. This milestone doesn't ask you to live miserably. It asks you to live awake. It gives you the chance to pause, reassess how you handle money, and prepare intentionally for the next step. And the next step isn't spending more. The next step is building a stronger foundation. $10,000 is not the destination, it's the exit. And this is where everything comes to a close, not with an explosion, but with a very quiet shift. $10,000 doesn't change your life overnight. You still wake up the next morning. You still go to work. You still face the same familiar problems. There are no fireworks, no cinematic moment. But if you pay close enough attention, you'll notice something far more important. The trajectory has changed. You sleep differently. Not because all your worries disappear, but because your brain no longer has to stand guard all night. You stop mentally bracing for disaster, even when there's no sign of one coming. Your sleep gets deeper, not because life is easier, but because you know that if something happens, you can handle it. You speak differently, with your boss, with partners, with yourself. You don't have to choose your words out of fear of losing your only option. You don't have to pretend to agree while suffocating on the inside. Your voice slows down, it steadies. Not because you're more powerful, but because you're no longer cornered. And most importantly, you decide differently. Not every decision is perfect, but they no longer come from panic. You stop choosing the least bad option just to get through the day. You start considering what actually fits the direction you want to move in the long term. A small difference in the starting point, but over time it creates two completely different paths. This is what so many people miss when they talk about money. The greatest value of $10,000 isn't what it allows you to buy. It's who you become while building it. Someone who has proven to themselves that they can delay gratification, that they can endure short-term discomfort in exchange for long-term security, that they can hold on to money even when no one is forcing them to. From there, everything else becomes possible. Not guaranteed, not easy, but possible. And that's the most important line in personal finance. The line between merely reacting to life and starting to design it. The difference between surviving and designing your life isn't income. It's the moment you feel safe enough to think. And for many people, that moment begins with $10,000.